Autism isn't anything new, but panic about autism is everywhere.
The federal government is reporting a dramatic increase in how many children are being diagnosed with autism.
It is exactly what led to an unprecedented crackdown in the state's autism program.
Australian experts are urging caution after the US president delivered extraordinary statements about autism this morning.
Welcome back. In the past few decades, fraudsters, politicians, self-styled experts have turned a neurological difference into a moral crusade and a business. From fake cures to vaccine myths, bad science created real damage. שלום, ברוכים השבים. בעשורים האחרונים נוכלים, פוליטיקאים ומומחים, כפי שהם מגדירים את עצמם, הפכו הבדל נוירולוגי למסע צלב מוסרי ולעסק. מתרופות מצויפות ואלה מיתוסים החיסונים מדרגות אצל ניצק ממשי. Herzlich willkommen noch einmal. In den letzten Jahrzehnten haben Betrüger, Politiker und selbstständige Experten eine neurologische Besonderheit zu einem moralischen Kreuzzug und zu einem Geschäft gemacht. Von falschen Heilmitteln bis hin zu Impfmythen. Fehlgeleitete Wissenschaft hat realen Schaden angerichtet. What is autism? And why do we keep hearing so much about it? Autism, or autism spectrum disorder, is a constellation of syndromes. It is overall characterized by differences in thinking and communication. People with autism interact and communicate differently, so-called neurodivergence. This can mean a lack of reciprocity in communication, difficulties connecting with humor or irony. People with autism may not have the same eye contact as others, might not connect with unspoken parts of a conversation. Autism can include repetitive behavior, like rocking, repeating phrases, reliance on structure and routine. People with autism may also have extraordinary focus on details or topics without context. Most famously, a person with autism might memorize a train timetable for someplace that person doesn't live.
Nästa, T-centralen. Byte till tunnelbana mot Kungsträdgården, Akalla och Hjulsta samt till pendeltåg. Tänk på avståndet mellan vagn och plattform när du stiger av.
There may also be sensory reactivity. People with autism may be averse to sounds, textures, or averse to being touched, may be easily overwhelmed by bright lights, loud sounds. Since autism encompasses so many elements, it's a diagnosis that can be thrown around a little too easily. A reliance on routine or attachment to details doesn't constitute a diagnosis. I mean, we all know someone who's memorized extraordinary details, someone who can tell you who won the World Cup in 2018. It was France. They beat Croatia 4-2. I don't like crowds. I don't like loud noises. I have a decent memory, but that's not autism. More recently, dubious online quizzes have implied that just about anyone can be autistic.
How you brush your teeth can tell you if you're autistic or not? Is that true? Well, actually, this is one of the main tests in your autism assessment.
In case this wasn't blurry enough, autism overlaps with other disorders. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, depression. Autistic kids are frequently subjected to bullying, and people with autism are more susceptible to suicide. It gets more complicated. People with autism are also more likely to be in sexual and gender minorities. People with autism are more likely to be gay, lesbian, or bisexual. In terms of gender identity, people with autism are more likely to be transgender. In the most severe form of autism, people can be nonverbal. This presents an extraordinary challenge for parents. Parents might be teed up for a kid who looks and acts like the others, but they end up with a kid who cannot play peekaboo, who doesn't play with toys, or who doesn't speak. The pediatrician, Paul Offit, described the pain and shame that some parents experience. Educated, middle-class professional parents have gone so far as to murder their autistic children. What was missing for these parents was support, infrastructure, and awareness. Maybe not everyone agrees.
Those people, meaning the disabled, the costs to the federal government, those people should just die. So what he said about William, his grandnephew, who he never met, by the way, never met. I find it shocking that a person could say that about another human being or a group of human beings.
Parents of autistic children are extraordinarily vulnerable. They want to know why their kid is different. Where did they go wrong? How do they fix it? Parents have tried subjecting autistic children to absurd, dangerous treatments. This includes chelation, a risky blood treatment usually used in the case of severe lead poisoning. Autism has nothing to do with lead, and chelation can be deadly. Oh, I like this. Chelation as a dietary supplement. Anything to make money from scared parents. In another cringeworthy scam, parents of nonverbal children have turned to facilitated communication. A facilitator, also known as a quack, claims to interpret what a nonverbal child wants to say. The facilitators use the same tricks as those who claim to speak with the dead. Keep it vague, keep it positive. Desperate parents lap it up, and facilitators cash in.
Inside these autistic bodies, there was someone who had something to say.
It seemed like a revolutionary idea that if someone holds an autistic child's hand or arm a certain way, that child can type their own thoughts. And for the first time, every parent's dream, actual communication.
Tell me your favorite word to spell.
Intelligent.
For the first time, the Wendros feel that maybe, just maybe, they found an answer to their prayers.
Chelation, facilitated communication, it all took a crushing turn for the worse in 1998. Andrew Wakefield, a physician in England, published a study suggesting a link between autism and bowel diseases and the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, MMR. The study was absurdly small, just 12 subjects. Wakefield argued that giving kids the measles, mumps, and rubella components in one vaccine was too much. That's ludicrous. If I had a cold and I sneezed on you, that would be rude. That sneeze would contain hundreds of thousands of droplets, each containing millions of antigens. A few antigens in an MMR vaccine is nothing for a human immune system, even in a baby or small child. Wakefield managed to get his article published in arguably the most prestigious medical journal in the world, The Lancet. This was also right around the time that the American Psychiatric Association broadened the definition of autism spectrum disorder. It thereby made it look like there were suddenly more autistic people in the world, an epidemic that wasn't happening.
Confused by the rapid increase in autism in this country, in the childhood epidemic, that is chronic epidemic, disease epidemic.
And the MMR vaccine is usually administered right around the time when children are diagnosed with autism. Therefore, a false relationship between the vaccine and the disease. It gets worse. Money. Wakefield had plans to make cash out of vaccine litigation, and he wanted to develop a new vaccine with his own patent. The whole thing was a scam. The Lancet retracted the article. But how did Andrew Wakefield get such junk science in a prestigious journal? So let's talk about just how bad this was. Only 12 subjects, no control group. The results were based on subjective recall from parents, not objective data. He cherry-picked his cases. No biologic plausibility to describe how the MMR vaccine, bowel disease, and autism could ever be linked. Wakefield staged it as, if this is real, it's big. And that got the editors of The Lancet to pay attention. He was really presenting a case study, not a vaccine trial. Real clinical trials of vaccines have thousands upon thousands of subjects, not 12. Above all, Wakefield did not disclose his financial interests. Oh, and the Lancet paper never said that the MMR vaccine causes autism. In fact, it said we did not prove an association between MMR and the syndrome described. But Wakefield was after fame, money, press attention. He held a press conference arguing that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine components shouldn't be administered together. That wasn't even in his bullshit paper. He just used it as a reason to promote his litigation efforts and his own vaccine. Wakefield painted himself to be the savior. He said, if I'm wrong, I could live with it. If I'm right and I do nothing, I could not. Oh, please, Andy. That's not science. That's some sort of self-serving fake morality crap. Wakefield lost his medical license in the United Kingdom, and he moved to the United States. Even though Wakefield was discredited, his license revoked, the damage was done. To this day, many still believe that vaccines, and not just the MMR, cause autism. It makes for a perfect conspiracy theory, painting Andrew Wakefield as the man with knowledge that vaccine manufacturers, big pharma, don't want you to know. The man who knew what caused autism but was silenced. Andrew Wakefield wasn't some Aaron Brockovich.
And listen, good work. They're a great start. We're just going to have to spend a little time filling in the holes in your research.
Excuse me, Teresa, is it? There are no holes in my research.
He was looking for cash. He was shamelessly dishonest. Wakefield's lies persist. Just 2 months ago, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services asked for more research about giving the measles, mumps, and rubella components of the vaccine together. Seriously, how are we still having this discussion? It's not a discussion. Under the Secretary's demands, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, now has a disclaimer on its website suggesting that there could be a link between vaccines and autism. That's dead wrong. But the chief said it, so they had to publish it. Uh-oh, who's that? Oh, it's science calling. They'd like to have a word. There's more. The same Secretary of Health and Human Services also latched on to the idea that acetaminophen, Tylenol, paracetamol, Panadol could cause autism if pregnant women took it. There had been some studies with conflicting evidence about this, but a large study published in 2024 in the Journal of the American Medical Association showed zero relationship between acetaminophen and autism. It was a solid study. It used siblings so the researchers could control for other genetic and environmental causes of autism. But the damage was and is substantial. Pregnant women are now afraid to take acetaminophen. The reality is that a fever is seriously bad news for a pregnant woman. So if we stop women from controlling fevers, we just made everything worse.
Now, President Trump has urged pregnant women not to take the painkiller paracetamol because of an unproven link to autism.
It's cruel. It could result in more birth defects because we scared women away from taking what is safe and effective. There is quite a simple timeline that dismantles the Tylenol argument. Autism was first described in 1911. Acetaminophen first hit the U.S. market in 1950. Just in case the acetaminophen argument wasn't enough, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has no medical, healthcare, education, training, anything, suggested a link between circumcision and autism. That's flat earth type of crazy.
Watch. So there were here's Hawaii. Right here, there was a medical emergency. Someone had a heart attack or a baby or something, and they had to land. So if you're a pilot, you'd probably land in Hawaii or continue over here. Maybe you go back. I doubt it. But instead, they went up to Alaska. Why the hell did they go to Alaska?
But autism strikes so many emotional chords that even a theory this insane still gets attention. Oh, and one more problem. The U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services also hailed a drug called leucovorin, folinic acid, as a treatment for autism. there had been some tiny short studies that showed some improvement in communication in autistic children who were given folinic acid, but these were minuscule studies without scientific rigor or statistical power. Despite the lack of data, the secretary used unusual influence to get leucovorin approved for diseases like autism. Leucovorin, folinic acid, is most known for its role in cancer chemotherapy. It's not chemo. One of the drugs most commonly used in chemo is methotrexate. It's an antifolate. Methotrexate blocks rapidly dividing cells from replicating, and cancer cells are rapidly dividing. In other words, it can stop cancerous cells from reproducing. At the same time, other rapidly dividing cells can be affected, like those in hair or the digestive tract. In some chemo regimens, patients are given high-dose methotrexate with leucovorin rescue. Leucovorin replenishes folate to mitigate side effects. Folinic acid, leucovorin, is available without a prescription in the United States. It can be purchased as a dietary supplement. Mehmet Oz, a member of the current presidential cabinet and in charge of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, owned substantial shares in a manufacturer of folinic acid called iHerb. Oz has since divested his shares in iHerb, but it's pretty sus, to put it mildly. Well, what are the problems? Now there's a leucovorin shortage. People undergoing cancer chemotherapy might not have access to a drug they need. And attention to leucovorin diverts attention from other aspects of autism treatment. What about funding programs to support autistic children and their families, like occupational therapy, special education? Nope. The U.S. Department of Education just gutted the majority of special education funding. And it's not just kids and families who get shortchanged. Special education employs many people: teachers, researchers, occupational therapists, psychologists, aides, techs, and more. Well, couldn't we just find the cause and get rid of autism? Welcome to Eugenics. This is the idea of somehow optimizing society so that people with neurological or psychiatric differences, developmental disabilities, neurodivergence, they wouldn't exist. It would somehow make life easier, right? Be less expensive, right? No. Although often attributed to the Nazis, you knew I'd be bringing them up.
Hitler. Heil 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 Hitler. You know, Freddy Finkel. Heil Hitler. 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 Heil Hitler.
Eugenics started as an American phenomenon. At the beginning of the 20th century, a biologist, Charles Davenport, approached Mary Williamson Harriman, the widow of a railroad magnate. Davenport wanted money to support the Eugenics Record Office. Davenport and others sold Mrs. Harriman that she could fund a scientific humanitarian effort to intervene and curtail feeble-mindedness. They sold her on the idea of record-keeping and scholarship, but they sugar-coated the part about sterilization. Eugenics would mean involuntary sterilization for those deemed to be feeble-minded, unfit, different, or unwanted. Mrs. Harriman had plenty of company. Alexander Graham Bell, Teddy Roosevelt, Oliver Wendell Holmes, John D. Rockefeller, Helen Keller, Winston Churchill, they were all behind it too. Then the Nazis joined in, because of course they did. The Nazis took a utilitarian argument. People with disabilities, or neurodivergence, they weren't really happy, right? They weren't contributing to society. They wouldn't be able to stand at the front lines in combat, as if those were the only reasons to be alive. In an extensive propaganda campaign, the Nazis portrayed people with disabilities as lebensunwertes Leben, life unworthy of life. As was typical around the world in the 1930s and 1940s, people with disabilities, including autism, were institutionalized. The Nazis went further. Under a thin veil of medical propriety, physicians looked at charts of patients with disabilities, and they marked some of these with an S, or Sonderbehandlung, special treatment. In Germany and Austria, places like Hattheim, Sonnenstein castles, disabled people, especially children, given the letter S, were given lethal injections, or they were gassed to death. Even hardened Nazis had trouble stomaching the violent deaths of the young and innocent. The staff at these institutions weren't entirely comfortable with the idea either. There was some pushback from the Catholic Church. The Nazis continued the program, but they dispersed it to local institutions, diffused it. The central office for planning these murders was at Tiergartenstrasse number 4, that's Zoo Street in Berlin. The program was therefore called Aktion T4. There's a small monument there, and that location is now the Berlin Philharmonic. Eugenics lost its appeal after the Second World War. Societies eventually moved toward deinstitutionalization, looking for the best ways to support people with autism and other disabilities so they could grow and develop. And one more thing. As I discussed in the video about behavior detection, the U.S. Transportation Security Administration, TSA, uses terms like special selection all the time. They still mark boarding cards with an S or 4 S's for passengers deemed to need special handling. Of course, they're not killing anyone, but I really wish the TSA had taken a few history lessons before using that vocabulary. But let's not pick on the TSA. They're working unpaid at the moment, and many of their staff would be horrified if they knew what an S or special selection meant in the 1930s and 1940s. I understand it. Autism is hard. It's hard for families, for schools, for systems built around sameness. But a more challenging way to grow up isn't a reason to be eliminated or prevented from living at all. If we start defining the value of human life by how easy it is to manage, there's no place to stop. The same reasoning once justified sterilizing the poor, institutionalizing the disabled, cleansing or perfecting society. We don't eliminate life's challenges by eliminating the people who experience them. We learn how to make their worlds and ours more livable. And of course, it is a spectrum. Autism can often be a hidden disability, but it can sometimes be something more ostensible. And there are people who are nonverbal, but at age 10, they're able to talk. Or even people who remain nonverbal as adults, but they write books and plays. As far as cures and treatments go, I often talk about this in the setting of cancer. Many talk about a cure for cancer, but cancer is more than 200 diseases. It's not like tetanus where you have a single germ, a single vaccine. Cancer, autism, spectrum disorder, these are multifactorial illnesses. You can't just give someone antibiotics or leucovorin and expect it all to change. And if you're seeking to eradicate neurodivergent people, who else do you want to eliminate? Thanks again for joining me. See you next time. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Bis nächstes Mal. Tודה shuv. Litot.